April 10th. It is 7:52 p.m., and this is a special meeting of the School Board of West Bend Joint School District Number 1. More than 24 hours prior to the meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of this meeting was posted at the entrance doors of the Education Service Center and on the district website. It was also sent to the West Bend Memorial Library, Daily News, WRYU, and the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, as well as other media sources that have requested notice of our meetings. Superintendent Wimmer, could you confirm this meeting was properly posted?
Yes, it was.
Great, thank you. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. We recognize the quorum of our board with all 7 board members present. And just getting my agenda set here. So tonight, I think, Superintendent Wimmer, I may turn this over to you because under our action items, we have consideration of a number of books. This is really a continuation of the board's discussion at its regular meeting several days ago.
Correct.
But I'll have you, and also I should recognize that also Dr. Quinn Trueblood is joining us remotely, and I see she's on the computer next to me, and thank you, Kelly, for tending to the microphone and things. And so, Dr. Trueblood, thank you for joining us as well. Superintendent Wimmer, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Recall this is a conversation. It's a follow-up from not just our board meeting the other day, but first originated from the curriculum committee in its meeting in analyzing fourth quarter book selection. So working within the current kind of confines that they had, they were bringing forward books for additional review, seeking approval for fourth quarter implementation from the full board. That discussion was had just this week on Monday. We had the opportunity to call a special meeting where the board could consider and take action on each title individually. The information regarding each title, why it was kind of outside that filter that had been previously discussed, and those notes are under each book title. They were shared on Monday as well as earlier regarding the curriculum committee. So each one is there, giving you that rationale. Board members also had an opportunity to take those books and look through them. So at this time, we can take title by title because board members may have differing opinions about each book. To look for potential action from the board. Dr. Trueblood, as you said, is on the line. If there's any question during discussion to go a little bit more in depth on any of the information or the titles being presented for, again, potential implementation this fourth quarter in the grade levels listed, she is available and online with us.
So, Superintendent Wimmer, wondering if maybe just a little quick overview. So, just as a matter of history, this board set some guidelines regarding curriculum, and the board's going to be sick of me using this term all the time, but we knew that it was going to be an iterative process. The idea that we were going to give it a try, the curriculum committee was going to report back as it relates to this is what's working or here are some challenges that we're having. And so right now it's really some of those guidelines that are causing the questions to arise.
Correct. So recall that, again, not unique to our school district, but in many districts across the country, the topic of book selections had come forward. There's some pieces that we did as a board in September. We put that in. We knew it would not be perfect by any measure. So kind of living through that process, the curriculum committee as a separate piece is going through the feedback from staff, from our families, kind of wading through that and looking at how to refine the process that's in place. But that's future work of that committee. They're engaged in it right now. They've heard recommendations already. They're looking at policy language. They're looking at procedures. And they'll come forward at another time for the either a board work session or continued discussion. But right now, the committee felt that these were really questionable. They felt like maybe there was, the filter might have been too tight in some spots. And again, not having that authority, wanted to bring it to the full board for discussion and consideration because that fourth quarter is upon us. So time was of the essence. So we felt it warranted to kind of break these free from that larger process.
Great. So thank you. I think that's good context. So board members, I'm happy to go through these one by one if we think that Seems like a logical approach. If anyone has a different approach, I'm happy to hear it. Otherwise, I think we'll take that. So let's start with the first one. So the first item is consideration for fourth quarter book club inclusion, A Mighty Long Way, My Journey to Justice at Little Rock Central High School. And I know we have the written materials here. I'm not sure, Dr. Trueblood, if you want to give us a bit of an overview, or maybe a different member of the curriculum committee. How would we like to proceed?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay. So, specifically to this title, but also generally to all the other titles, what you have before you is really the grade level, also the learning focus, the study of which these books will be placed in, and a summary and where the category of excess was. And in this case, it was graphic violence. There is text evidence, as you can see before you, and there are two in this text evidence section. And so I think the exercise for sure would be to take the totality of what we have right now, because the curriculum committee already did their heavy lifting of saying that, of recommending this particular book to come before you, because all the other elements have been verified as good educational value. So the task at hand, I'm just going to reiterate because it's the first time we've done this, is to really look at the graphic violence. The threshold is none in this particular book. And that if we look closely at the text evidence, which is what the curriculum committee did, the question at hand is, would we allow this book to be used in the fourth quarter and make a judgment about whether or not I'm just going to stop there. So it is important, though. Larger context is so important. And I guess what I'd like to do is, it would be very difficult to do contextual information for each of these titles because it does take a while. And that would be the work of the curriculum committee. But for the sake of the exercise of tonight, we would really focus in on the text evidence and the category for which it was exceeding.
Great, thank you. What I'll do is, it sounds like, generally speaking, members of the curriculum committee, it sounds like the general recommendation would be this should be something that would be considered for adoption or approval by the board, correct? Correct. What questions do other board members have? I then would move to, right here, I will move to approve the book club title, A Mighty Long Way, My Journey to Justice at Little Rock Central High School, as presented. Is there a second? Second. Kelly, thank you. Motion and second to approve this title. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We move to the next item, consideration for fourth quarter book club inclusion, Spies of the Mississippi, the true story of the spy network that tried to destroy the civil rights movement. And I'm assuming, Dr. Trueblood, this is, again, similar methodology and consideration as we had talked about for the prior title.
Yes, please.
Great. Again, curriculum committee, I'm assuming this is something that was recommended for adoption by the board. Board members, any questions with regard to this title? I'll just pause and just bring up something I think, John, that you had brought up. One of the things, both for the prior title and this title, I'm persuaded by is these are items of literary nonfiction. At least in my decisions, I'm taking that into account. I think that makes sense. But other board members, any comments or questions? Hearing none, I would move to approve the book club title, Spies of the Mississippi, the true story of the spy network that tried to destroy the civil rights movement, as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kurt. Motion and second to approve this book club title. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We move to the next, which is consideration for fourth quarter book club inclusion, Moneyball. This one, Dr. Trueblood, I'd like a bit, go ahead, please, proceed.
Yes, thank you. We're just thinking right on top of each other wonderfully. So I wanted to add, though, with this particular title, it is in a different category, and that is an obscene language. And it does have a threshold for which the board had set in the fall of last year. the threshold here at the eighth grade level is infrequent. And you can see the words that are itemized in this text. The total book, the total page is 336. But I did want to draw your attention specifically to the additional information for which the National Council of Teachers of English did provide for how they use the rationale for the inclusion of obscene language in stories. And I don't want to read it to you, but I think it's very significant because it does provide more depth and breadth of understanding for the place of language, specifically swear words, if you will, or profane language in stories. So I want to just give you a moment to review the additional information here in context as you make a decision on this particular book.
So this title, I have to admit, when I looked at it, I thought, wow, 8th grade, that seems like a lot. I also am reminded that these are book club titles, so correct me if I'm wrong, if the board were to approve this title, this would then fall on the list of, it would still require parental consent, is that true?
That is correct.
Okay, and that would be true for the other 2 titles that we had, correct?
For every single book that is on a book club list would require consent.
Okay, so that's good background. Kelly, were you, oh, I thought you were drawing breath, sorry about
So
that.
this
John.
book is recommended for 9 to 12th grade, ages 14 and up, with the amount of, obviously, F words and S word, bitch, ass, damn, all these are just, they're not appropriate for an 8th grade book level. I mean, according to ratings and everything else and reviews online, I mean, it doesn't even say it's appropriate for a middle school grade. I mean, I just don't, I've seen the movie, it's a great story, and it's unfortunate that they have to put this much in because there's not that much in the movie. There's not. I mean, I think I've watched it, there was 2 F words in it, and the story still played out. It still had a great story, it had a great, all around theme to it, and it just, this is not needed. So I'm going to be a no for sure.
Other discussion? Melanie?
Yes, I just also wanted to add, I know it's sometimes hard to find a lot of information on the specific books, but I do know the movie I looked at, it was rated PG-13, but it only had 2 F words. And with 45, I mean, that would probably put it at an R rating if it was a movie. And so for me, I'm also going to be a no on this one.
Chad?
I have a question. How has the curriculum committee decided for using infrequent? Is it a number? Is it a percentage? What would you consider infrequent?
I think that's a question for Quinn.
That was actually not, I will answer that since I do have a strong recollection. And please, committee members, jump in or lead, please. There was an inability to actually have a calculator that was going to be used because many times words aren't actually counted accurately within a text, and that would be exhaustive work. And secondly, a number really would be arbitrary. So in this case, what you have is, because this book is pretty popular, somebody did count all these words, certainly not our staff. And we have the totality of the actual 336 pages. So there was not any work that was done in what infrequent really was, specifically or precisely.
The reason I ask is because this book I was able to find has 79,000 words, and there's about 110 inappropriate words in the book, which would be about 0.13% of the total book. And so I'm not saying that I'm advocating for all of these swear words. I'm just saying, what are we using as infrequent? Because 0.13% sounds infrequent to me.
We actually, in our staff, in our
So how
department,
are-
we did the same math. So I'm really glad that we had to do that basic math. But it would be just one of those things where it was very hard to say, should we say 5% is infrequent or 6%? So I do believe, though, I would agree with you that a 1% is very close to 0.
So that's my question is, like, we have these guidelines, which I'm in favor of some measure of how do we do this. So should this book be flagged? In my opinion, 100% it should have got flagged by the curriculum committee as, hey, this is not a book we can just say, yep, anyone can have access to this book. This has been on the 8th grade reading list previous years.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of educational value in terms of, interest is not the only thing, but there is quite an exciting story here, as you can imagine, and it does really grab a young reader. It does grab adults too. So this is for the learning purpose. This is not the only story in the whole world, but it is a very, very successful book for the learning purpose.
And as far as you know, have there been any prior complaints about this book in the years that it's been available? Have any parents called up upset about it? Or felt
I didn't ask specifically, but I can tell you that the teachers would say that it is popular, but not simply for the swear words at all. It is a very dynamic story, and it does get into the world of baseball players and how teams are formed. So I think that is really the larger piece for the reader, not for the word counter, if you will.
Yeah, so I mean, I would love to see books with the need for less swear words. I'm still a fan of that. I feel like if you can say it without it, that would be better. But again, this book hasn't previously presented any issues that I'm aware of, and so
So what did you say the percentage was?
it was about 0.13%.
So if I calculate this out right, the average person speaks about 5,000 words a day, so you're okay hearing your kid say the F word 6 to 7 times a day.
I'm okay with them hearing it. Yeah, I mean,
But they would essentially be saying it because they're reading it. And that's the rationale I'm going with. If the average kid at school says that 6 to 7 times a day, that would be the same infrequency that we're looking at the book. And that didn't sound appropriate in a classroom setting to me. I'm sorry. I'm not saying your opinion's wrong. I'm just saying this is how I'm rationaling the opinion that I'm coming up with.
I respect your opinion, John. I do. I sincerely respect your opinion. And, we have a difference of opinion there, and that's okay. I'm glad. It gives us discussion to this book. I'm just looking at it saying that my overarching approach to these book club books is that if the staff that we have entrusted to review these books and put these on an optional list have had no issues with this book, and it's been a popular book, and it's been well received, and they haven't had kickback from like every student who reads this then just goes running around saying the F word. If that's the case, then my overarching reasoning for this would be that the book could stay on the book list because it is a default no unless it is affirmed by a parent as a yes. And so you and I could both have our kid bring this list home, and you could look at it and say, no way are you even getting to look at that book. And you could say no. And I could look at it and say, hey, if you're super interested in that topic, be mindful of the swear words and understand when it's appropriate and not appropriate to use a swear word and how it's used in context. But go ahead and read it. If you're mature enough to handle it, go ahead.
But appropriateness for using a swear word it doesn't sound rational because you can literally get a disorderly conduct for swearing in public. So there's not an appropriateness for using a word like that.
Yeah,
And for a child, age 13, let's say, where this book is literally for 14 and up and grade 9 to 12, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. And I would agree that if this were a mandatory piece of curriculum, I would agree with you, John. But it is optional, and I'm going to side in favor of letting the parents choose whether or not they want their kid to read it. I mean, a parent can choose that.
They can, and they can choose to read it outside the school.
So I'm not sure if it's Superintendent Wimmer or maybe Dr. Trueblood. So we're talking about this is for 8th grade, and I don't know how to ask this question, but I'm just trying to think. Can you just comment on 8th graders? I mean, is this wrong from a maturity level for them? On the one hand, I think the world has changed quite a bit since I was in 8th grade. And when you think about movies that 8th graders can see and such, that this isn't necessarily shocking. But can you help put that into context. Clearly, this is not being presented as part of the curriculum to glorify or say this is great. But nonetheless, I mean, it is exposing them to it, again, with parental permission. I'm really on the fence on this one, and I'd just like to understand if, we certainly wouldn't say this is appropriate for kindergarten for a number of reasons, including the reading comprehension and such. And we might say, well, this could be appropriate for a senior in high school. I'm just trying to kind of discern the line a little bit. And would you care to comment on that a little bit?
I'd like to come back to the very premise that we have our English teachers who have many, many years of experience and are licensed to offer many, many titles for learning in a book club list or a choice format. So they would not bring this forward if they did not believe that this was developmentally appropriate, had value, had educational purpose, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to get into the body of that. But to answer your question very basically, yes, it is absolutely appropriate for the 8th grade for some students. It is not for other students, and that is for all students, but parents and teachers know their student best, and that would be the responsibility of the parent to say yes or no on that. And that's exactly what you have set up so wisely right now. So I hope I've answered your question that there is no question about whether or not this is an appropriate book for this grade level. It is a question of whether it's appropriate for the student based on what the parent would permit or not permit.
Helpful, thank you. I think regardless of how this vote turns out on this particular title, I would appreciate seeing ultimately, if this does show up on the list, permission and such. It would be interesting to see how the permission slips come back on this one. I'm just curious. So, but we'll see how it comes through. All right. Any further discussion on this? Kurt, I know you had mentioned previously.
This was a close one for me because it's nonfiction. But I'm going to be voting no on this. I have an explanation, and I'll go through it well, I might as well go through it now. I flagged
Go
a
ahead.
couple of these books. This was a close one for me. I take it how I was raised, how I was brought up, how that swearing escalates a situation. And see, I've always had a problem with swearing, whether you're the parent swearing at your kid, whether it's a kid swearing at your parent, whether it's a cop swearing at somebody he's arresting, whether it's somebody that's being arrested swearing at a cop of authority, whether it's a boss, that you have an employee swearing at you, or you have a boss cursing you out. So I don't like, at least in a public school district, us having that it should be norm that I can swear. And because I thought about this in the last 2 days, I read these books, but I'm going to stick with how I was raised, and I think we got to walk back swearing and some of the violence, at least in the teaching realm. That's how I was raised. My dad was a guidance counselor. I got lectures every day of school, and that's how he lived his life and taught me how to live my life. So I'm a tough no on this.
Very good. Other discussion? Oh, go ahead, June, please.
So my take on this is that reading a word is very different. The True Blood say a couple times about the subculture of these characters in this book. And then I also want to point out that in the 8th grade, I remember the schedule of my children. These teachers are spending 2 class periods in ELA with 8th graders and 7th graders, I think, at Badger. They have a back-to-back, so they're spending 2 class periods a day with these students, and so they get to know them pretty well and can steer them away if need be.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this one? Like I said, I think I'm very, very close on this one. What I am persuaded by is that this is something that a parent would need to approve. I think this one, I will just say, is very much on the edge. I will side in this one with parental involvement and permission. But again, this one is very, very edgy. So, but I will be voting in favor of this. Is there any further discussion on this item? Then I will move to approve the book club title Moneyball as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll give that one to Chad. Motion and second to approve the book club title Moneyball is presented. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
No.
We will mark that as Kurt and Melanie and John as noes. Do I have that correct? That's 4 to the yes, 3 to the noes. It'll be so entered in the minutes, and I appreciate the discussion. And I think something, Superintendent Wimmer, worthy of additional discussion as we talk about overall rules. So we'll carry that away. But thank you for everyone for sharing thoughts and opinions. We move to the next, which is consideration for fourth quarter book club inclusion, Woods Runner. And Dr. Trueblood, any additional comments on this item?
The only one I would add, though, here is that even though the study is theme identification and analysis, what you'll see specifically is that it's historical fiction. It is Native American, and it is about the U.S. Revolutionary War also. So that puts together the context of this particular story. And then we have text evidence for you to review, and we have a threshold of none for graphic violence. But as you can imagine, there are some more scenes in this time of period in America.
Thank you for that. You know, one item, and I don't know if this is for a board poll, you know, I read some of this language, and I appreciate the fact that it's being brought to the board to look at. And again, maybe this is a terrible sign of the times, but I look at this and say, this is something that would appear in a newspaper for the most part. I mean, the language that's used. And so the idea of its graphic violence, I'm not sure it even rises to that level. But I am glad this is being brought here, nonetheless, just in case. Any thoughts or comments on this title? Hearing none, I would move to approve the book club title Woods Runner as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Kurt, thank you for that. We have motion and second to approve the book club title Woods Runner as presented. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. The next item is consideration for fourth quarter book club inclusion, Stuck in Neutral. Dr. Trueblood, any additional commentary on this item?
This would be one of the very first books where there is diverse abilities or a disability here with severe cerebral palsy in the main character, and a very overarching theme in this book. And so there is a extended fight scene in this book, but it is the singular fight scene that is in question for text evidence. It is a story. I don't want to go too far into it because we want to really look at the text evidence, but it is a family story.
John?
I'll just say, upon research, which was not, I did not nearly have enough time to research all of these as much as I would like to, but some of the research and the reviews did talk about the reading level of this book, and it appears to be at a second grade reading level from what I can see. A lot of reviews were saying the book was very boring, and obviously from the notes here, it does line up with some of the reviews talking about how there was a lot of making fun of the kid with disabilities and kind of that becoming a norm in the book. I don't see a whole lot of educational value in that, especially being at the reading level it is. With that said, I would assume a lot of kids won't probably, I don't know, hopefully they wouldn't read
Can
it
I just
anyway.
add a little more information? Thank you. Thank you for that. Contextual English is a particular level of English in our offerings, and it is the struggling or striving readers level. It's an entry level or the lower level of all the levels. And so it is really important to have books that are available for students who are at the broadest range of abilities. And so that's why this book does meet some needs. So I will stop there.
And how will we make sure that the kids that don't need that are going to be actually, put through the paces and actually challenged in the school then? If this is an optional book for all of that grade, I mean, I don't want some kid that's reading at a very high level just to pick this book because it's easy and we can get through it. I think there should be educational value to it.
He probably wouldn't.
I actually appreciate the point very much, because certainly we talk to our teachers about that, and it's very rare that students don't strive and go to higher levels of reading that they're able to, because the stories just become more age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for them. So we actually do not see students going to a easier level. What we do is we see students wanting to strive for the more challenging stories, because they become more complex and more exciting for them.
Excuse me, other questions or thoughts?
I had a hard time with this one too. I feel like the fight scene was pretty disturbing, and just a lot of bullying of a disabled person. That hits me a little harder probably than all people, but yeah, to me, I don't know, too disturbing for me.
Yeah, Dr. Trullo,
Very
maybe,
bloody.
maybe you can just talk generally about, there's so many, and I was not an English major, but my understanding is much of literature involves stories that involve struggle and then triumph over it. So when we look at this particular book, is that part of it, to say, look, that this would be recognized as a reader as behavior that is not right, and you have a protagonist who triumphs in the end?
There is a triumphant story here. It is definitely not this excerpt, but this is the one we're looking at. But this whole story about this circumstance for this young boy in this book, he does resolve, and he is resilient, and he does move forward and upwards. And so it does look like very harsh bullying with the peers. What really comes into play in this particular book is how he copes and how he survives and becomes stronger for it. But that's the part that you don't see in the record right here. But that's why this story can resonate with some of our readers very honestly.
And I appreciate that context, because my first reaction was very much like Melanie's. I'm like, wow, it's negative. It's a negative behavior. But I also understand that many pieces of literature talk about terrible things that happen to people, but the idea is to put it as a lesson of triumph or redemption. So I'm glad to hear that that's the outcome.
Just a reminder that what you're looking at is really a few pages in a book, and we're talking about a very narrow scope, which is the graphic violence. But there's so many other elements for which these books hold value for students and for the lessons involved. And so I think that's our work to do. But for the purpose of tonight, it is really important to kind of realize that this is not the only thing about this book. This is the one thing about the book.
Other thoughts or questions? All right, I'll start to call the question. I would move to approve the book club title, Stuck in Neutral, as presented. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. We'll give that one to June. Motion and second to approve Stuck in Neutral as presented. Any final discussion?
Maybe a question.
Go ahead,
me
Kurt.
This is one book, I've read more in the last 3 days than I have in a long time. This is one book I didn't read, so I'm going to defer to the experts. I want to abstain from my vote.
Very good.
So that's, I didn't read the book.
Nope, that's fine, Kurt. Thank you. All right, we have a motion and second on the floor. Any final discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nope.
We will have Melanie as a no. We have John as a no. That's 2 no's. And Kurt, I'm registering you as abstain. Is that correct? All right. We will record that as 4 in favor, 2 opposed, and 1 abstention. Thank you. We move to the next item, consideration for fourth quarter book club inclusion, cruise control. And Dr. Trueblood, any commentary on this item?
This is just incidental, but this also involves the life of circumstances of somebody very near and dear who has also cerebral palsy. And there is a family dynamic here that is very undesirable, but there are lessons to learn from it. It is exceeding in graphic violence for 2 fight scenes, and this is in defense of the main character's disabled brother. So there is a nuance here that is pretty significant in this particular plot line, that he is defending a brother who has this condition, who has a cruel father. And so there's a brotherly story here that is quite miraculous, if you will. So we do have 3 different text evidence for you to review and discuss.
Thank you for that background and commentary. Board members, questions, discussion? Hearing none, I would move to approve the book club title Cruise Control as presented. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Kelly. Motion and second to approve Cruise Control as presented. Final discussion. Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
We'll have Melanie and John as noes. So we will record that as 5 in favor, 2 opposed. Thank you for your votes. We move to the next item, which is consideration for fourth quarter book club inclusion, Gutless. And Dr. Trueblood.
Thank you. This is in the category or a study of coming of age. And if you just read the summary, it does look like there's a lot of bullying going on. But the thing about bullying in adolescence is it is quite pervasive in many different levels. And so some of these books do resonate with certain students, or they're very curious about this. And the one thing that doesn't show up as clearly in the written text that you see here is that this is a story about bravery in a very, very age-appropriate way. And it does attract some readers, and it does teach a lot of things that specific readers might be curious about. But for sure, bullying is something that every student knows about, and they want to be on the right side of it and be an upstander. So this is an example book for that.
Dr. Trueblood, can you describe, for instance, during the book club, so let's say a student selects this, and I'm assuming they're not just left on their own to read it, that there's some sort of discussion. How might a teacher normally include that in discussion, if you know what I'm saying? How might that be addressed?
Yeah, so if in a book club you have, say, 2 or 3 other students who are reading the same book. So it might be about character development. It might be about, in this case, coming of age. It could be, how does this particular character deal with conflict, or what's the language in the text that shows us that that is happening, and how does the author write that to describe that? And so I can tell you that the conversations are not necessarily about how mean or how good or how wonderful these characters are. It really is kind of begins very technically, like how does the author actually develop this character, and what are those pivot points for the development of this character? So that's usually how it happens. They don't sit and talk about bullying. That's not the whole point. And that's that's just not the scope of the work. But because the story does revolve around that, a lot of the lessons that the students have to come up with in their discussion have to kind of anchor the lesson with, what does the character do here in response to some of the things that some of the experiences that this character has. But more importantly, how does the author write it so that you understand it? So I hope I described that as best as possible. It's better to watch it in happening. But I can assure you that they're not sitting there talking about, bullying. They're really talking about the technical aspects of how do you write a story like that, or how does the author accomplish that, and what happens to that character over the course of the book.
Thank you. John?
So some of the reviews do talk about, the book is actually meant for ninth grade and up, but also some of the reviews did talk about sexual content or gestures. Can you speak to that?
Yes, we did clear all those and verify that some of them are inaccurate for sure, and the content that was described was not explicit. That's why it did not flag in that category. So it was inaccurate, and it was some of the public commenters may have different conceptions of what sexual content is. In this case, we had explicit description of a sex act, which was not contained in this particular book.
Other discussion? Kurt?
Actually, I didn't read the whole book, but I plan to, having a niece and nephew that's Asian, adopted from Korea. This brought home some, so I like it having an option for the Asian community that I think gets abused more than a lot of minorities, and they take it. Like, I think this character in the book took it. So I like its story. I think it's appropriate. So I'm going to read the full book. So I'll get there. So I'm voting yes for it.
Thank you, Kurt. Other discussion, observations? All right, we'll move this item forward by, I will make a motion to approve the book club title Gutless as presented. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, June. We have a motion and second to approve Gutless as presented. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Melanie and John, we will record as no. So we have 5 yes and 2 noes. That motion carries. Thank you. We will move to the next item, which is consideration for fourth quarter book club inclusion on the come up. Dr. Trueblood, any commentary on this item?
The only one I'd add is this did exceed an obscene language, and this particular book, if we look at the National Council of Teachers of English rationale, this book is a really fine example of just the different culture that a student in West Bend may be exposed to that would be very different from their own. And it would be a great discovery of, many surprises. And so this particular book, we talked about it in our vetting process, does really exemplify that rationale of why it has value. But for the purpose of the lesson itself, we can see that there's some swear words here. But it is a very long book, by the way, and it does have a good amount of cultural diversity in it.
All right, thank you for the commentary. Board members, any questions, discussion? Kurt?
In the home stretch of my last board meeting, so.
That's all right.
I want to say I generally, for any teachers listening, my default all along has been trusting the teachers and the experts, so I'm not an expert in this, but if it comes to just what I think is appropriate education of our youth, again, I flagged, it was hard for me to read. Of course, just because of the swear words and just promoting people how to talk like that, is just, I think, is not appropriate for a public school district. So I'll be voting no.
Thank you. Other discussion? Kelly?
I don't think that this is promoting or telling people that they should talk like this. I think this is a cultural thing that is not represented on this current board sitting here right now. And we need to be respectful that there are people that talk like this. There are people that this is what they grow up listening to, and they might need this option for them.
Melanie?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I agree with Kurt. I don't think profanity belongs in schools. So I'm going to be a no.
Thank you. Additional discussion? All right, well, let's move this for consideration. I'd move to approve the book club title on the come up as presented. Is there a second? Thank you, Melanie. We have a motion and second to approve the book club title on the come up as presented. Final discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
No.
I have Kurt, I have Melanie, and I have John. Do I have that correct? That's 3 no, 4 yes. The motion carries. Thank you for the discussion and for the votes. We move to consideration for fourth quarter book club inclusion, Dear Martin. And Dr. Trueblood, any commentary on this item?
Thank you. This is the final title, and it is, again, a cultural book, African American. It is overcoming adversity. As you can see, it is realistic fiction. There's lots of evidence in the records, in many different record streams, that this is the way, a description of real things that happened and put into a storyline for a ninth grade level novel or book. So I think, based on what I heard from the earlier book on on the come up, this would be in the very same vein. We have obscene language, we have countings of it, we have no text evidence except that it's 224 pages. But I just wanted to say again that representation is very strong in this particular kind of book.
Board, questions? Well, and the curriculum committee as well. Any questions or comments on this one? John?
I'll just say this doesn't even take into account all these swear words that it takes the Lord's name in vain. I mean, I got through a few pages and it has multiple things plus that. So I'll be a no for sure.
Thank you.
This is totally inappropriate for a curriculum.
Melanie?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. The obscene language, that kind of puts me in the no, but also a lot of alcohol use with minors. Even on the first page, it was talking about somebody that was drunk, and so for me, that's also gonna be no.
Kurt?
Yeah, I'm a no too, because even as fiction, there's plenty, I think, of true stories out there that could be told appropriately. I'll just put it at that.
Very good. Thank you, Kurt.
I'm just going to advocate for parental choice again on this one.
I will say I'm defaulting to parental choice also. This one is another close one for me, and I look forward to additional discussion as we, go forward around, broader expectations and rules. But it's close, but I'm tipping in favor of parental choice on this one. Any other discussion or thoughts? We'll move this forward, then I will move to approve the book club title, Dear Martin, as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and second for Dear Martin. Final discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No.
I have Kurt, I have Melanie, and I have John. Is that correct? Okay, great, thank you. And so we record 4 yes and 3 no. The motion carries. We've reached the end of our planned agenda, and so I would move to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Melanie. We have a motion second to adjourn. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.